The air aboard the Varelian Ark shimmered with a low hum, a deep ultraviolet pulse that resonated through the ship's alloyed bones. The corridors were dark, illuminated only by strips of bioluminescent thread embedded in the walls. To human eyes, it was disorienting, but to Lysera, it was clarity. Every shade of violet revealed intent, mood, hierarchy. She adjusted her wristband, its sensor plates flickering across the spectrum, and stopped before the observation cell. Inside, the human sat shirtless on the cold composite floor, bruised but unbroken, his breath fogging faintly in the chill air. Lysera's throat tightened, though she'd never admit it aloud. The records called him Subject 417, but she had already stopped thinking of him as that sterile designation. His name was Marcus. When she entered, the cell door's pressure seal released with a hiss that echoed like a sigh. Marcus didn't look up. The humans had a way of feigning indifference that fascinated her, a studied quietness masking storms. Lysera paced slowly, her black armor glinting under the pale lights. "You haven't eaten," she said, her voice cool, melodic. "Do you plan to starve just to inconvenience me?" Marcus's lips curved slightly, not a smile but something more defiant. "Maybe I just don't like the menu," he said. The translator caller rendered his voice in perfect Aurelian tones, but the cadence was still human, rough edges, sudden flickers of humor amid fatigue. Lysera felt the faint pulse of interest stir in her chest. She crouched before him, the sleek plates of her armor whispering against themselves. "Your species," she began, "is curiously resistant. Even the lower gravity here should have weakened you by now." He lifted his gaze to meet hers. His eyes were a dark brown, so unreflective they seemed to absorb light. "Guess we're stubborn," Marcus said. "That's what you get for bringing one of us up here." Lysera studied the lines of his face, noting the way the muscles tensed when he spoke, the faint tremor of adrenaline. The Aurelians had catalogued hundreds of sapient races, but none like these mammals from Sol 3. Too unpredictable. Too alive. She reached out a gloved hand, tracing the line of his jaw with a scientist's precision and a woman's curiosity. Marcus didn't flinch, though his pulse quickened. Her fingertips, sheathed in synth metal, were cool and smooth, and she could feel the heat of his skin through the material. "You react," she murmured, tilting her head. "But you do not retreat. Is it pride or instinct?" "Maybe both," he said softly. "Maybe you're trying to find out which one breaks first." Lysera smiled faintly, though the expression felt strange on her lips. She was supposed to observe, not engage. But the humans had undone many supposed boundaries before. She had read the reports of their wars, their art, their desperate bravery in atmospheres that boiled or froze. They were a paradox of cruelty and compassion. And now, in the flickering shadows of her laboratory, that paradox sat breathing before her. She prodded his shoulder lightly with a single metallic finger, a test of muscle response, pretending that was all it was. "You're avoiding rest," she said. "Why?" Marcus leaned back against the wall. "Because I don't like dreaming in cages." The answer caught her off guard. Aurelians slept without dreams. To them, the mind was a tool, not a theater. "Dreaming is inefficient," she said, almost reflexively. "You waste cycles imagining." "Or we use them to stay human," he countered. Lysera's jaw tightened. "You make defiance sound noble." "Maybe it is," Marcus replied, his tone steady. "Especially when someone's trying to take it apart piece by piece." His words struck a frequency she didn't understand, an undercurrent of meaning that tugged at her composure. Lysera rose and began circling him again. "You think too much of yourself," she said, though her voice lacked venom. "The Council studies behavior. That's all." "Sure," Marcus said. "Behavior. Reflexes. Reactions. Maybe you're just looking for something you don't have." That stopped her. The room felt smaller, the hum of the ship pressing closer. She turned sharply, eyes narrowing. "And what would that be?" Marcus's gaze didn't waver. "The reason we fight when there's no chance left." Lysera's heartbeat, A soft bioluminescent pulse beneath her clavicle quickened. Her species valued logic, clarity. But this human, this primitive, kept dragging her toward something else. Something irrational. She wanted to dissect it, to dissect him, and yet the line between study and fascination had already blurred. Her gloved hand lifted again, and this time she placed her finger against his lips, an unplanned gesture. "You talk too much," she whispered. Marcus's breath warmed her fingertip. Then, slowly, deliberately, he closed his mouth around the edge of her finger. The sensation startled her, the pressure, the heat, the raw nerve of it. It wasn't an attack, not really, but a message. His teeth grazed the smooth alloy with just enough force to make her knees weaken, to make the circuits in her neural band flare with unexpected input. She withdrew her hand sharply, but not before she saw the flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "Don't do that again," she said, though the words came out unevenly. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his tone steady but quiet. "Maybe stop treating me like an experiment." For a long moment, neither moved. The hum of the Varelian arc seemed to sync with the rhythm of her heartbeat, a steady, dissonant echo in the metal chamber. Lysera turned away, more to collect herself than to assert authority. Her reflection in the wall panel showed a warrior scientist shaken, her normally precise poise fractured. "You misunderstand your situation," she said at last. "I decide when you speak, when you eat, when you move." "Then why are you still standing here?" Marcus asked. The question lingered like static. She had no answer ready that didn't sound hollow. Lysera stepped closer again, her control slipping into a kind of charged uncertainty. "Your people fought the Aurelians for 7 cycles," she said. "You lost your world. Your command fell. You were captured. Yet you still posture as if power can be reclaimed by words." Marcus's expression softened, though his eyes remained fierce. "Power's not the point," he said. "You can cage a body, not the rest of it." The statement resonated in her mind like a data loop she couldn't terminate. She should have found it naive. Instead, she found it radiant. She turned her head slightly to hide the subtle tremor that passed through her jawline. The translator recorded the silence as if it were another form of communication. For the first time, Lysera disabled the observation cameras. A single motion of her wristband, and the lens lights dimmed. "You're not supposed to do that," Marcus said quietly. "No," she replied. "I'm not." She stepped into the full beam of the cell's light, allowing him to see her properly. Her skin shimmered with faint luminescence, an effect of both biology and armor interface. "Look at me," she said, her voice softer now. Marcus did. The barrier between captor and captive thinned to transparency. "You think I enjoy this?" she asked. "You think any of us do?" "I don't know," he said. "But you feel something, don't you? Even if you don't have a word for it." Her breath caught. The Aurelians had purged emotion from their lexicon centuries ago. They had no single term for desire, for guilt, for empathy. Yet those unnamed sensations were blooming now, uninvited. She looked at the faint mark his teeth had left on the alloy tip of her glove, a dent, microscopic but real. Proof that even engineered perfection could be altered by human will. "You shouldn't have done that," she said again, though this time the warning had no edge. Marcus tilted his head. "You shouldn't have put your hand there." A quiet spark passed between them, part defiance, part understanding, entirely forbidden. For the first time in many cycles, Lysera wondered which of them was truly under examination. She left the cell without another word. In the corridor, the violet light burned brighter than before, or maybe her vision was simply sharper, too alive. Her pulse refused to slow, and the alloy mark on her glove felt heavier than any weapon. Somewhere deep within the ship, the engines shifted tone, a subtle reminder of how far they were from any sun. Lysera paused, pressing her palm to the wall, feeling the faint vibrations beneath. Humanity was supposed to be a dying fire, a curiosity studied before extinction. But Marcus had bitten through that assumption as cleanly as he'd bitten her glove. She realized, with a sudden clarity that terrified her, that she wanted to see what he would do next. She composed herself before returning to the upper decks, but the silence between heartbeats still throbbed with memory. Every logical pathway told her to erase the moment, to file it as contamination of experiment. Yet her mind replayed the pressure, the audacity, the pulse of life. The Aurelian's empire thrived on order, but something in her, something buried deep and human-like, had cracked open. She did not yet understand it, but she knew it was irreversible. She looked once more at her reflection in the chrome elevator doors and whispered, "He's dangerous." The statement should have been a warning. Instead, it sounded almost like a promise. Lysera didn't sleep that cycle. Instead, she watched the diagnostic readouts from the human cell, each heartbeat traced in quiet pulses of light. The Aurelians didn't understand obsession, they'd eradicated it from their neural design long ago, but Lysera was beginning to recognize its shape. Every time his pulse steadied, her own rhythm betrayed her. She told herself it was data integrity, that she needed to ensure the subject's stability for further trials. Yet her mind replayed the sensation of that bite, that shock of heat and defiance that had traveled from her finger straight through her composure. Something fundamental had shifted, like a crack forming in a crystal's flawless lattice. By the next rotation, she had prepared a new protocol, officially a neural mirroring study. Unofficially, it was an excuse to be near him again. When she entered the cell, Marcus was standing, the first time he'd bothered to move from the wall. He looked stronger than before, or maybe it was just that she could see him differently now. "You're back early," he said. "Miss me?" The translator's tone made it sound teasing, but beneath it was something else, a challenge. Lysera approached, her boots whispering against the floor. "Your vitals require continuous calibration," she said. "You're unpredictable. That's what you like about us, isn't it?" Marcus asked, leaning slightly closer. "That you can't map every reaction like a machine." Lysera activated the neural interface on her wristband. A translucent pattern bloomed across her forearm, lines of light tracing her veins. "This device will mirror your cognitive patterns onto a controlled grid," she said, ignoring his tone. "Try not to resist." Marcus smirked. "That sounds like something you'd say right before torture." "It's observation," she replied, though her voice softened unexpectedly. "Nothing more." The contact pad extended from her wrist and pressed lightly against the base of his neck. The data stream flickered to life, and instantly, her mind was flooded with alien sensations. Heat, sound, flashes of color that didn't belong to her species. For a moment, her vision swam with images from his memory. Burning skies, laughter, a woman's voice, the taste of salt on wind. She staggered slightly, pulling back before the system could overload. "Your mind is chaotic," she said, steadier than she felt. Marcus rubbed his neck where the pad had touched him. "Yeah, we're not built for neat data." Lysera's heart was racing again, each beat amplified by the lingering echo of his memories. "You dream even when awake," she murmured. "You imagine outcomes that don't exist." "That's called hope," Marcus said quietly. "It's what we do when the odds are bad." Lysera frowned. "Hope is illogical." "So is biting someone who could vaporize you," he replied, and this time she couldn't stop the faint laugh that slipped out. The sound startled her. It had been cycles since she'd made that sound. She turned away to reconfigure the grid, forcing her focus back to the screens. The data was erratic, filled with anomalies no Aurelian pattern could interpret. "Your neural impulses defy mapping," she said, almost to herself. "It's as though your brain refuses equilibrium." "Maybe that's the point," Marcus said. "We keep moving. Balance is just another word for standing still." The sentiment was absurd by Aurelian standards, yet as she watched his pulse stabilize on the monitor, she realized the pattern wasn't random, it was adaptive. His mind wasn't failing to conform, it was surviving every attempt to contain it. That realization filled her with equal parts admiration and unease. She wondered if the council had ever truly grasped what they'd captured. Marcus sat again, watching her work in silence for a time. "Why are you doing this?" he asked finally. Lysra didn't look up. Because understanding you may prevent further conflict. Or make it easier to control us, he countered. She hesitated, then turned to face him fully. Do you think I want control? You already have it, Marcus said. You just don't know what to do with it anymore. His words hit deeper than she wanted them to. She realized he was right. Not about the authority she held, but about the uncertainty it masked. You shouldn't speak so freely, she said, though the warning lacked conviction. Why not? He asked. Afraid I'll say something true? Her silence was answer enough. She tried to regain distance, to restore the clean lines of purpose. You think too much of the personal, she said. This is a scientific exchange. Marcus smiled faintly. You keep telling yourself that. The room's temperature seemed to rise a fraction, though the controls hadn't changed. Lysra could feel the tension between them, an invisible current shifting with every breath. She reached for her wristband again, intending to end the session, but Marcus spoke first. What's it like? He asked. Living without feelings? The question cut through her defenses. Efficient, she said, almost sharply. But empty, he pressed. Lysra's throat tightened. We eliminated emotion to evolve beyond chaos. And ended up creating it again, Marcus murmured. In me. The words lingered, impossible to dismiss. Lysra stepped closer before she realized she'd moved, drawn by something that logic couldn't define. You misunderstand your role, she said quietly. You are not part of us. Maybe not yet, Marcus said, meeting her gaze. His confidence unsettled her more than any aggression could have. She reached out again, fingers hovering inches from his face, and stopped herself only at the last moment. You are reckless, she whispered. It's how we survive, he said. The hum of the ship deepened, the lights flickering as power rerouted to propulsion. The shift sent a faint tremor through the floor, and Lysra braced herself with one hand on his shoulder. The contact sent another pulse through both of them, heat, electricity, understanding. She should have pulled away. Instead, she stayed there for a heartbeat too long. Marcus didn't move, though his expression softened. You feel that too, he said quietly. Your sensors aren't broken. This is irrelevant, she said, but her hand remained where it was. Is it? He asked. Or is this the first real thing you've felt in your entire life? The question cut deeper than data ever could. She stepped back abruptly, the temperature in her body regulation system spiking. You presume too much, she said. And yet, Marcus replied, you keep coming back. The quiet confidence in his tone was infuriating and intoxicating. She turned on her heel and strode out, but the echo of his heartbeat followed her into the corridor. Back in the observation deck, Lysra stared out at the nebula ahead, a storm of color suspended in vacuum. It reminded her of something from his memories, the chaotic beauty of Earth's skies. She hadn't understood it before. Now, she saw meaning in the disorder. The neural grid still flickered on her screen, lines of light intersecting unpredictably. To the Aurelians, it would look like failure. To her, it looked alive. Her superior, Commander Valen, appeared on the hollow interface. Your progress, he demanded. Incomplete, she said quickly. The subject remains resistant. Then accelerate dissection, Valen replied coldly. The council grows impatient. Her breath caught. He is not ready. He is not supposed to be ready, Valen said, and ended the transmission. Lysra stood in silence long after the hologram faded. Dissection was not analysis. It was termination. She closed her eyes, pressing her palms together to steady her thoughts. The logical choice was compliance. But logic had already begun to erode, replaced by something far more dangerous. She turned off the grid and initiated a private lock on the cell controls. Only her code could access them now. It was treason by every measure of Aurelian law. Yet when she thought of Marcus's words, of the bite that had left its mark, She felt certainty instead of fear. The Aurelians sought to unmake what they couldn't understand. But she, against all training, wanted to protect it. When she returned to the cell later, Marcus was awake, his expression cautious. "You look like you've made a choice," he said. Lysera approached slowly. "They plan to dissect you," she said. "Tomorrow." His jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "And you?" "I plan to stop them," she said. "Why?" "Because you make me question everything I've been taught," she admitted. Marcus exhaled slowly. "That's dangerous." "Yes," she said. "It is." For a moment, they stood in silence, two beings from opposite ends of a galaxy bound by defiance. Lysera stepped closer, close enough that her voice became a whisper. "If I do this, there will be no return for me." Marcus looked into her eyes. "Then let's make it worth it." The Varelian Ark drifted through a region of uncharted space, its engines muted to near silence. The ship's exterior shimmered faintly against the void, a silver scar moving through blackness. Deep inside, Lysera stood before the control console, override codes flickering in her retinal display. One command could unlock Marcus's restraints, another could open a containment breach wide enough for both of them to vanish. Every rational cell in her body screamed against what she was about to do, yet her hands moved without hesitation. The Aurelians taught that feeling was weakness, but at this moment, emotion felt like clarity. She keyed in the final sequence and waited for the acknowledgement tone. When the cell door opened, Marcus was already awake. He must have sensed the change in the ship's rhythm. Humans were attuned to subtle things like that, vibrations, echoes, emotional undercurrents. "You're early again," he said, voice low but calm. Lysera stepped inside, her armor dimmed to minimal luminescence. "We have little time," she said. "I've locked the observation feeds. The command deck believes you're still sedated." Marcus rose to his feet, eyes narrowing. "What are you planning?" "Escape," she replied simply. "For both of us." For a second, disbelief crossed his face, followed by something like concern. "You realize they'll hunt you down for that?" "Yes," she said. "But they won't find what they don't understand." He took a step closer, studying her. "Why me?" Lysera met his gaze without flinching. "Because you reminded me that life isn't something to categorize. It's something to protect." Marcus exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "You're risking your whole world for a prisoner." "Not for a prisoner," she corrected softly. "For proof." He frowned. "Proof of what?" "That even perfection needs chaos to evolve." The words surprised even her. They came from somewhere deeper than intellect. She moved to the control panel on the wall and pressed her hand against it. The metal shimmered, then parted, revealing a concealed passage leading into the ship's maintenance corridors. "This way," she said. Marcus hesitated only a second before following her into the narrow space. The maintenance shafts were dim and hot, filled with the low whine of reactor conduits. Lysera led the way, her armor emitting just enough light to guide him. "We'll reach the auxiliary hangar," she whispered. "There's a drone pod. Small, unarmed, but fast." Marcus ducked beneath a pipe, his voice a low murmur. "You really planned this out." "Efficiency," she said, "is a habit. Feels like rebellion to me." She glanced back at him, and for a moment their eyes met through the thin veil of steam. Perhaps both. They continued in silence, each step echoing against metal. The hum of the ship's pulse fields vibrated through their bones, a living reminder of the empire she was betraying. Halfway through the shaft, the alarms began to sound. Not loud, Aurelian systems didn't panic, but steady, rising tones of disapproval. Lysera cursed under her breath. They detected the cell breach sooner than expected. Marcus moved beside her. "How much time do we have?" "Minutes," she said. "Maybe less." They climbed a vertical conduit, the heat intensifying as they neared the reactor zone. Marcus's human physiology wasn't designed for it, but he didn't complain. Sweat rolled down his neck. and Lysera found herself noticing the persistence in every strained motion. "You're overheating," she said. "We can stop for—" "No," he interrupted. "You said minutes. Let's use them." The sheer determination in his voice pulled her forward like gravity. They reached the hangar hatch, a wide circular door sealed by biometric lock. Lysera pressed her palm to the reader. It scanned, hesitated, then blinked red. "Access revoked," she muttered. "They've already restricted my clearance." Marcus stepped closer. "Can you override it?" "Not fast enough." He stared at the mechanism for a second, then crouched. "How sensitive are these locks?" "Extremely," she said. "They're designed to detect biological interference." "Good," Marcus replied. He slammed his shoulder into the panel, then again, and again, until the casing cracked open. "What are you?" she began, but then he bit into the exposed fiber bundle, tearing one wire loose with his teeth. Sparks flew. The panel glowed white, then reset with a tone. The hatch slid open. Lysera blinked, astonished. "You damaged the circuit deliberately." "Instinct," Marcus said, grinning faintly. "Sometimes brute force beats finesse." She stared at him, both horrified and impressed. "You could have vaporized yourself." "Would have been quick though," he said. Despite herself, she almost smiled. "You're infuriating." "You're welcome," he replied. The hangar beyond was dimly lit, rows of drones hanging from magnetic clamps. Lysera sprinted to one and began programming its core. "The pod can carry us beyond the ship's shield radius," she said. "Once we reach drift space, we'll disappear." "And after that?" Marcus asked. "We find somewhere the Aurelians won't look," she said. "Somewhere chaotic enough to hide in plain sight." As she worked, the door behind them sealed automatically, a delay protocol triggered by her override. They had maybe 2 minutes before command forces reached the bay. Marcus approached, studying her fingers as they danced across the controls. "You ever think you'd do something like this?" "Never," she said. "But I also never thought one human could dismantle centuries of certainty." The pod's engines began to hum, a low vibration rising from the floor. "Get in," she ordered. Marcus hesitated. "You sure about this?" She turned to him, eyes glowing faintly in the light. "No," she said. "But for once, uncertainty feels right." That was enough. He climbed inside, and she followed, sealing the hatch behind them. The pod detached from the Varelian arc with a shudder, thrusting into the void. For a moment, there was only silence, the stars vast and cold outside the viewport. Then the ship's comms crackled to life, Valen's voice cutting through. "Commander Lysera, you have violated direct council order. Surrender now." Lysera stared at the console. "Ignore it," Marcus said. "They'll track the transmission." "I can't just—" "You can," he interrupted. "You already chose." She muted the channel, and the silence that followed felt cleaner than any Aurelian signal ever had. Outside, the nebula loomed, swirling blue and violet. "That's the nebula expanse," she said softly. "No ship dares enter it. The electromagnetic turbulence destroys navigation." "Sounds perfect," Marcus said. They plunged into the storm. Colors fractured across the viewport, plasma arcs dancing like lightning made of glass. The pod rattled violently. "Stabilizers failing," Lysera reported. "We'll burn out in 90 seconds." Marcus braced himself, gripping the console. "Can you reroute the energy?" "I can try," she said, fingers flying across the interface. The pod lurched, then steadied slightly. "We're losing power but maintaining vector." "That's good, right?" Marcus asked. "It's survivable," she said. "That's all I can guarantee. Guess that's better than before." He gave a short laugh, and despite the chaos, she found herself laughing too, a strange, unfiltered sound that filled the cabin like sunlight in a storm. When the turbulence finally subsided, they were adrift in quiet space, surrounded by a glowing halo of charged particles. Lysera checked the readings. No trace signatures detected, she said. We're off their scanners. Marcus leaned back, exhaling. So, we did it. For now, she said. Aurelian pursuit algorithms will recalculate soon. We must keep moving. He glanced at her. You're shaking. She looked down at her hands. They were trembling slightly. Residual stress, she said quickly. It's unfamiliar. Marcus reached over, gently touching her wrist. That's called being alive, he said. The contact steadied her more effectively than any neural recalibration could. She met his eyes, realizing how alien and human both could coexist in one fragile moment. He smiled faintly. You know, for someone who doesn't feel, you're doing a pretty good impression. She almost replied, but the words caught in her throat. For once, silence seemed sufficient. Outside, the nebula light shimmered like an ocean reflecting something divine. Lysera closed her eyes and listened, to his breathing, to the faint hum of systems, to her own pulse aligning with his. Humanity had been her experiment once. Now, it was her revelation. What she didn't know, what neither could yet see, was that far behind them, the Varelian arc was already turning, recalibrating its course toward the nebula. The Council didn't tolerate anomalies, and Lysera had just become the most dangerous one of all. The nebula was not a place meant for travelers. Waves of ionized gas drifted like luminous tides, twisting in unpredictable arcs that made navigation a gamble. The pod's shielding shimmered under the constant electrical bombardment, each pulse lighting Lysera's features in shades of blue and violet. Marcus sat beside her, his breath fogging the air as the temperature dropped. This thing's holding together, he said, voice strained. But barely. Lysera's fingers danced across the control interface, recalibrating power between life support and propulsion. The field's density is higher than projections. If we stay near the center, we'll be invisible to Aurelian scanners. And if we don't? Marcus asked. Then we burn, she said flatly. He gave a short laugh, shaking his head. You Aurelians sure know how to make optimism sound terrifying. Optimism is inefficient, she replied. Then maybe that's why we keep winning, even when we lose, Marcus said. She looked at him sideways, intrigued despite herself. Explain. We don't stop, he said. Even when logic says it's over. Hope's like, he gestured vaguely toward the storm outside. That. Messy. Beautiful. Dangerous. But alive. Lysera absorbed the words, her gaze drifting to the swirling lights beyond. The nebula felt alive indeed, like some ancient being exhaling energy around them. Perhaps, she murmured, chaos has its own kind of order. Now you're thinking human, Marcus said. Careful, it's contagious. They shared a small smile, the first unguarded one between them. But it didn't last long. The proximity sensors flared red, multiple signals converging. They've found us, Lysera whispered. The readings were unmistakable, Aurelian hunter drones, sleek and merciless. How? Marcus asked, tension sharpening his voice. They must have tracked our initial vector, she said. They won't risk capture protocols this time. Meaning they'll destroy us. She rerouted all available power to propulsion, the pod shuddering under the strain. Hold on. Marcus gripped the seat, watching plasma arcs flicker dangerously close outside. The drones appeared moments later, distant silver shapes gliding through the storm like predators cutting through waves. We're outnumbered, he said. Always, she replied. The first energy burst struck the pod's shield, sending sparks cascading through the cabin. Systems flickered. Lysera hissed through her teeth, countering with a hard turn that threw both of them sideways. We can't outrun them, Marcus shouted. Then we'll outthink them, she snapped. Her fingers flew over the controls, eyes narrowing in concentration. The nebula's magnetic fields distort their sensors, but only if we synchronize to the pulse frequency. Which means what? Which means we let the storm hide us. The pod veered sharply into a dense cloud of plasma. Lightning illuminated everything for a heartbeat. The blue of her skin, the determination in his eyes, the crackle of something unspoken between them. Then the storm swallowed them whole. For minutes, they were blind, guided only by instinct and the faint rhythm of the pod's heartbeat. "You trust this?" Marcus asked. "No," she said. "But I trust you." He blinked. "Me. You navigate through chaos better than I do," Lysera admitted. "You read it." He leaned forward, scanning the flickering light outside. "All right," he said. "Follow the quiet zones, where the lightning doesn't hit. That's the current flow." She obeyed, adjusting their vector accordingly. The pod slipped through arcs of ion fire, invisible in the haze. The drones followed, but their targeting systems glitched under the interference. "They're losing us," she said. Marcus grinned. "Guess chaos likes me." "Or maybe it recognizes you," she said, voice almost reverent. They emerged from the densest field into a calmer pocket of space, the storm's glow fading behind them. For a brief moment, silence returned. Lysera slumped back, exhausted. "We've escaped the perimeter," she said. "But not for long. They'll reconfigure." Marcus studied her face, the tight control around her eyes, the faint tremor in her hands. "You're running on empty," he said. "I don't require as much rest as you," she replied automatically. "That's not what I meant." His voice softened. "You're carrying all this alone." She met his gaze and saw no pity there, only understanding. "I chose this," she said quietly. "Then let me share it," he said. "You don't have to be the only one fighting." Her instinct was to refuse. But the truth pressed too heavily to deny. "The Aurelians will call this contamination," she said. "They'll erase my name, my record, everything." Marcus reached out and gently took her gloved hand. "Then maybe it's time someone rewrote the record." For a moment, she didn't pull away. The touch was steady, grounding. Outside the viewport, the nebula's light reflected faintly in his eyes, like twin stars burning through darkness. Lysera's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you ever regret what you've lost?" Marcus hesitated. "Every day," he said. "But not right now." The words settled between them, fragile and powerful. She felt something inside her realign, no longer an observer, but a participant in something utterly human. The pod's console beeped suddenly, breaking the moment. "Incoming transmission," Lysera said. The signal was heavily distorted but unmistakable. It was Valen. "Lysera," the voice crackled through static. "You've doomed yourself. The Council demands your surrender. Deliver the human, and your record will be restored." She muted the channel, pulse quickening. "They're offering you your life," Marcus said. "No," she replied. "They're offering me emptiness." She turned back to the console. "We can't fight their fleet. But we can end the pursuit." "How?" "By showing them what they fear most," she said. "Human unpredictability." Her plan formed as she spoke, a dangerous alignment of logic and instinct that even she couldn't fully explain. "We'll turn the nebula itself against them." Marcus frowned. "That sounds suicidal." "Only if I fail," she said. She began typing rapidly, rerouting the pod's reactor core into the ship's signal transceiver. The nebula's charge frequency can overload their sensors if amplified. "You're going to make the storm scream at them," Marcus said, realizing. "Exactly. And if it overloads us too? Then we'll burn together," she said. He gave a crooked smile. "Romantic." She looked at him, startled by the word. "You use that term for destruction?" "Sometimes destruction's the only way to make room for something new." For a long moment, they stared at each other, the air between them electric. Then she hit the final command. The pod's lights flared white as the signal surged. Energy rippled outward through the nebula, magnified 1,000-fold. Across the void, the Aurelian drones convulsed, systems shorting in blinding bursts. "It's working," Marcus shouted over the rising hum. Lysera gritted her teeth, fighting to stabilize the pod's power grid. "Too much feedback," she yelled. "We need to release the excess charge manually." "How?" "From the outer hull." "I'll go." Marcus grabbed her arm. "No way. I'm better suited for manual work, remember." "You'll die out there," she said. "So will you if I don't," he replied. The look in his eyes was absolute. Before she could stop him, he unsealed the hatch, the rush of ion wind filling the cabin with light. Lysera shouted after him, but the storm swallowed her voice. Through the viewport, she saw his silhouette against the radiant void, tethered only by a thin magnetic line. He reached the emitter node and braced himself. "Now!" he shouted through comms. Lysera triggered the release, the energy discharging in a blinding pulse. The explosion of light consumed everything for a moment, erasing boundaries between color and sound, between human and alien, between fear and awe. When the glow faded, the nebula was silent again. The drones were gone, burned out, drifting. The pod was alive, barely. And Marcus lay collapsed near the hatch, his tether coiled like a broken lifeline. Lysera ran to him, her pulse chaotic. "Marcus," she whispered. He opened his eyes weakly, a faint smile on his lips. "Guess, it worked." "You reckless fool," she said, voice trembling. "You could have been vaporized. But I wasn't." His tone was soft, fading. "Told you chaos likes me." She pressed her palm against his chest, feeling the faint beat beneath. "Stay with me." "Trying," he murmured. "You Aurelians are hard to impress." She almost laughed, though her throat ached. "You already have," she said quietly. His hand found hers, fingers curling around her glove. "Then maybe we're even." His eyes fluttered closed, his breathing shallow but steady. Lysera exhaled shakily, her own heart pounding with a rhythm that was no longer entirely her own. Outside, the nebula's light dimmed, leaving them adrift in its fading glow. Lysera turned off the emergency alarms and leaned back against the console, Marcus's hand still in hers. She looked at the stars beyond and whispered, "You were right. Hope is chaos." The pod drifted in silence, its engines cooling, two fugitives suspended between worlds. But even in the stillness, Lysera felt movement, not of machinery, but of something deeper. Something human. Somewhere far behind them, the Aurelian fleet halted, their systems crippled, their logic undone. The Empire would send more ships, she knew. Yet for the first time in her existence, she didn't feel like running. She felt alive. Silence held the pod like a fragile heartbeat suspended in eternity. The nebula's storm had calmed, leaving only threads of luminous dust floating past the viewport. Lysera sat on the floor beside Marcus, her armor dimmed to conserve power. His breathing was shallow but steady, each rise of his chest an act of defiance against the void itself. She had stabilized his vitals with a Medigel patch, but the damage ran deeper: exposure, radiation, exhaustion. Yet even now, his pulse carried that maddening rhythm that Aurelians could neither replicate nor predict. She traced it through the monitor, watching how each beat refused symmetry. "You are a paradox," she whispered. "And somehow, you make me wish to be one too." Her systems flickered warnings across her visor. Oxygen levels critical, power reserves at 20%. They had drifted too far into the nebula's dead zone for any clean energy absorption. Logic dictated a choice: either transmit a distress signal, surrender, and survive under arrest, or vanish quietly into the endless dark. But Lysera had begun to suspect that survival without meaning was simply another form of extinction. She leaned her head back against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment. The hum of the engines faded to a slow pulse, like the breathing of something immense and weary. "You changed the equation," she murmured, looking at Marcus again. "And now nothing balances anymore." When Marcus stirred, it was gradual, as though he were climbing back from a dream. "Still here," he muttered, voice hoarse. Lysera turned quickly, relief flickering through her like current. "You shouldn't move. You sound like my old medic," he said with a weak grin. Annoying but right. She shook her head, unable to hide her small smile. You saved us, she said. We'd have been vaporized if not for you. Team effort, he murmured. You drove like a maniac. That is not a compliment where I'm from, she said. Then it should be, he replied. His eyes met hers, and she saw light reflected there, not from the nebula, but from something internal. You look different, he said softly. Less programmed. Lysera frowned slightly, though the warmth in his tone disarmed her. Perhaps damage to my neural filter, she said. Or perhaps something else. Yeah, Marcus whispered. Something else. He tried to sit up, grimacing at the effort. She supported him gently, the contact between them immediate, electric. You shouldn't risk further strain, she said, though she didn't pull away. I've had worse, he said. But I don't think I've ever had better company. Lysera blinked at him, unsure how to process the statement. Humans, she muttered. Always hiding sincerity in absurd phrasing. Maybe, he said. But we mean it when it matters. For a long moment, they stayed like that, two fugitives suspended between dying stars, both refusing to yield to silence. Then the sensors flared to life. A single signature appeared on the scanner, an Aurelian cruiser, massive and unmistakable. Lysera's pulse quickened. They found us. Marcus's voice dropped. Can we run? No, she said. The pod's power is nearly gone. He looked at her, calm but fierce. Then what's the plan? I surrender, she said quietly. And they will take you. Not happening, he said instantly. They'll kill you for treason. Better me than both of us. No, Marcus said firmly. You didn't come all this way to throw yourself to them. Lysera met his gaze, the determination there as steady as the stars outside. Then tell me another way, she said. He hesitated, then smiled faintly. We make them listen. Lysera tilted her head. Aurelian command does not listen. Then we'll force them to. He nodded toward the communication array. Broadcast. Public frequency. Let the entire fleet hear it. The idea was madness, heresy, rebellion, hope all twisted together. They will erase me, she said. Maybe, Marcus said. But they'll hear you first. She stared at him, at this fragile creature whose stubbornness had undone an empire's certainty. You are impossible, she whispered. Takes one to know one, he replied. Slowly, she turned to the console. The transmitter flickered weakly under her touch. She rerouted the last of the reactor's power to communications and opened the channel. Across the void, the Aurelian fleet shimmered into view, predators approaching their prey. Lysera's voice carried across the stars, steady and clear. This is Commander Lysera of the Varelian Ark, now unaligned. To the Council and all Aurelians receiving this, I speak not in defiance, but in revelation. The channel hummed with static, then cleared. We studied humanity as an anomaly, a lesser branch of cognition. But we were wrong. They are not primitive. They are possibility. They dream in patterns our minds cannot simulate. They survive where logic ends. They feel, and in feeling, they create strength beyond measure. Marcus watched her, silent. Her voice grew firmer. If perfection means emptiness, then I reject it. If evolution means forgetting what makes life unpredictable, then I will stand with chaos. The comms erupted with overlapping signals, warnings, commands, disbelief. Lysera, this is High Council authority, Valen's voice cut through. Cease this transmission. You shame your kind. No, she said quietly. I free it. Valen's tone hardened. You speak treason. I speak truth. She ended the transmission before he could respond. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus exhaled slowly. That, he said, was beautiful. Lysera turned to him, eyes bright. It was dangerous. So's being human, he said. Welcome to the club. She laughed softly, a sound that felt too large for the small pod. You corrupt everything you touch, she said. Maybe, he said. But only the things worth saving. The humor faded into quiet understanding. Outside, the cruiser drew closer, weapon systems online. Lysera met Marcus's gaze. We have no weapons, she said. Then we improvise, he replied. Like before. She stared at him, realization dawning. You intend to trigger the reactor manually. Just enough to blind their sensors, not destroy us, he said. You can calibrate the pulse. She hesitated, torn between reason and something far greater. If I miscalculate, then we go out on our own terms, Marcus said. He reached out, placing his hand over hers. Together. The word anchored her. She looked at the nebula one last time, its colors now faint, fading, but still beautiful. Together, she echoed. Then she entered the sequence. The pod's lights intensified, flooding the cabin with silver brilliance. Outside, the Aurelian cruiser slowed, uncertain. The energy pulse expanded like a silent explosion, rippling across space. Systems across the fleet flickered and failed. For the first time in centuries, Aurelian logic faltered under a single act of defiance. The pod drifted through the surge unharmed, cloaked in residual static. Lysera's breathing slowed, her eyes on Marcus. They won't find us again, she said. Good, he murmured. Means we finally get some peace. Peace, she repeated softly, as if testing the word. You humans make it sound so fragile. Maybe that's why we keep chasing it, he said, smiling faintly. Because it's worth breaking for. They drifted toward the nebula's edge, the glow fading behind them. Lysera looked down at her gloved hand, the same one still faintly marked from his bite. A small dent in metal, insignificant to any observer, but to her it meant transformation. Proof that imperfection could be sacred. What happens now? Marcus asked. We find a place that doesn't exist yet, she said. And make it real. Sounds very human of you, he said. I suppose it does, she admitted. He leaned his head back, eyes half closed. You know, he said quietly, you never really told me why you came into my cell that first day. She thought for a long moment before answering. Because I wanted to understand humanity, she said. And I still do. The nebula light faded completely, replaced by the distant glitter of uncharted stars. Lysera adjusted the pod's course toward a small, habitable moon orbiting a forgotten sun. Marcus drifted into sleep beside her, his hand still resting near hers. The silence around them was vast but not empty. It pulsed with a quiet rhythm that felt almost like hope. Lysera allowed herself one last glance at the nebula, the place where she had unlearned perfection and found meaning in chaos. You broke me, she whispered, her voice barely audible. And in breaking, I became whole. The pod slipped into the dark between stars, two lights bound not by fate or empire, but by the fragile gravity of being alive.